And good afternoon, everybody. This is Z Marcel Portute, and welcome to another edition of the Verbal Submission Podcast. I have been doing this show for many years, but my back research, not only have we not done a show in over 2 years, this is only the 5th edition of the show itself. If you've been listening to the Sports Inquirer show, which I highly recommend that you do, go to sportsinquirer.net and get our archives. I've been promising for months and months that we're going to do a mixed martial arts / professional wrestling specific show, and I now have the time and energy to do it. So we're going to make it happen today on June 4th, 2019. So very excited about all the things going on in the world of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts. And we'll touch on some boxing as well. Really the inspiration for Verbal Submission is to do combat sports, and I throw wrestling in there as well because there are some elements of combat sports in wrestling, professional wrestling. When I say professional wrestling, I mean WWE, New Japan, Ring of Honor, All Elite Wrestling, which we'll touch on in our first section of the show. So when I say professional wrestling, I mean that. We will do maybe some catch weight and do some of the other traditional wrestling that you may be thinking of at a collegiate level and professional level, as far as Greco-Roman or freestyle and that type of Olympic competition. But we're not going to do that on this show specifically, but we may touch on that as well. And boxing as well, as I said, combat sports. So when I say combat sports, I mean mixed martial arts, professional wrestling, as we've elaborated, and boxing. If you want me to do some kickboxing as well, or some judo tournaments or jiu-jitsu as well, those exist. We may broaden out to some of those in the future, but as I said, we're just going to focus on those three tenets. But as always, same thing as the Inquirer show. If you want to follow everything that we're doing, go to the sportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can head over. We just did a show a few days ago, so we have some really good content on Atlanta United, the NFL, NBA, the finals, and the playoffs. So we have a lot of that stuff going on there. So make sure you go check that out. WNBA as well, the Atlanta Dream. So make sure that you go to the site and give a look to what's going on there. Twitter and Instagram, Sports Inquirer, all one word. Subscribe to those sites, and that'll be a really good way to follow what we're doing. Facebook, The Sports Inquirer. And finally, subscribe to YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes, The Sports Inquirer. I have to check with iTunes. I've been reading some articles. It looks like Apple's going to drop iTunes. Very interesting development there if you're into the world of not only business, but communications and music and things along those lines. But as of now, we still have our iTunes up, so we may do an evaluation of that. But honestly, YouTube and SoundCloud have been very good sources for what we're trying to do. So make sure you head to there, and I said The Sports Inquirer. You go to the site, those sites, and subscribe to us on those, and that's where you get all of our up-to-date things. So as far as today's show, in the 5th edition of the Verbal Submission on June 4th, 2019, we'll discuss All Elite Wrestling. They had their second major event, pay-per-view, Double or Nothing. So we'll talk about that and what I liked and didn't like, and things along those lines. NXT Takeover will be the second topic. WWE had a show on June 1st on their network with NXT. And then finally, we'll talk about professional boxing and the heavyweight championship match between Andy Ruiz Jr. and Anthony Joshua, and what the implications of that upset win for Ruiz means for himself, Joshua, and the entire heavyweight division. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, we'll get all into All Elite Wrestling here on Verbal Submission. All right, and we're back. E. Marcel Portute for the Verbal Submission. I guess the reason I hadn't done a show in the past 2 years, well, we've been focusing on different aspects of the site and personal development and things like that. But there really hasn't been a lot to talk about because it's been mostly mixed martial arts and with UFC and WWE. And while we enjoyed those products very much, I want to have a diversified product to discuss. And while I've been getting more into New Japan recently, and there'll be some New Japan elements touched on with All Elite Wrestling because a lot of the main principles in All Elite Wrestling had some New Japan experience. But over the past 2 years, I've been really indulging in alternatives to Raw Wrestling Entertainment. And that includes All Elite Wrestling with the emergence of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, and with their involvement in the Bullet Club, which dates back a few years. I started really getting into New Japan. And the good part about that was that it opened my eyes to a lot of the other people, not only in Bullet Club, but with the Okada and a lot of the other guys that we'll touch on over the next few weeks. But the main thing was I got into All Elite Wrestling, and that's really good. What's happened is that with the emergence of the Bullet Club, with Omega, the Young Bucks, and Cody Rhodes, they have splintered off and started. Well, it started with the Elite, which is kind of like the subsection of the Bullet Club faction from New Japan. But they've now taken it to a professional level with All Elite Wrestling, which started less than a year ago. And they've had their second professional show on May 25th. So I've been really intrigued by what they've been doing from a business point, because if you know my background, I did used to work for a wrestling organization. I was an intern, but I was a paid intern, so I earned a paycheck there. So I like seeing ins and outs of the wrestling business and what's going on there. But All Elite Wrestling is an opportunity to see a organization literally from its infancy and its rise and its growth. So I've been really intrigued by that. But Double or Nothing was their event on May 25th, and I thought it was a very good show. I liked more of it than I didn't like of it. I thought that, and we'll go over the main event and kind of work our way down the card, and that's where you'll see my opinions and thoughts. But the overall arching thought was, I thought the production value was very good. They had a full house, so that was good. The commentary with Excalibur and Alex Marvez, I thought they were okay. I liked Excalibur. I thought he brought some decent legitimacy to the broadcast, the announce team. Marvez is a professional writer with the NFL, and he's done some writing in wrestling. You could tell that was his first show. I think improvements can be had. It just needs repetition. I hope that he does with their next events that they have over the next few months, because they have the Fight for the Fallen, and then I think the Fire Festival event. So they're doing about one event a month, and we'll break down their calendar later on. But he just needs more reps as a play-by-play guy. And speaking of play-by-play guy, they had a good old JR, Jim Ross, on the announce team. I think that's good, because Jim Ross is on a short list of greatest announcers of all time in professional wrestling. He brings such credibility to the team, but more importantly, he could tell that he's motivated, that he's hungry, he's ready to prove himself. He talked about they did a preview show about up to the event. He suffered the loss of his wife and a few years ago, and he wanted to get out of the house and do something different and be with a new product. And you can tell that he had a strong tone in his voice, and he was ready to go. So I thought that was very good as far as that goes. They're going to have to work on the chemistry. I'm interested to see what they do as far as the weekly show on TNT starting in the fall. I don't know if Jim Ross is going to be doing a show every week like that. I don't know if his schedule or his commitments are willing to allow him to be there every week. I think we'll see Marvez and Excalibur, or maybe another announcer. I think you'll see JR in the pay-per-views whenever they have them. So you'll see him in All In and All Out, all the other previews they have. But as far as the weekly show, I think we'll see Marvez and Excalibur. And I think that's good to have JR there to give them just a reference and some pointers. It's very tough doing a weekly, just doing a wrestling broadcast. It's so unique as far as the setup of it goes, because you're calling action for it's scripted. So you kind of know what the result is. Unlike a lot of other professional sports where you're calling the match as it goes, and you're calling the action where it's, if you're calling a baseball game, you're calling the hit, the catch, the throw, things like that. In wrestling, not only do you have to call the moves, you have to get people over or not get people over. There's a balance with everything that you're trying to do when you're doing the announcing, and that just takes a lot of experience. And Marvez and Excalibur, you can tell they were okay, but they're going to need some more experience in that regard. The production, I thought, was well. I didn't have any issues as far as viewing it online with the Bleacher Report and YouTube. The pre-show was on YouTube. That's how I watched it. And then the actual BR with the Bleacher Report, the show itself, I don't think I heard some people had a few issues, but technical issues like that are going to happen as far as people when they're viewing it. That's where you have to be very careful when you hear about people and their complaints. Is like the The video was stagnant. The audio was off. I mean, I have very good wireless internet here in our compound here in Georgia. But things happen. Things get cut off, get cut on. So I didn't hear overarching complaints as far as there was a match missed. In terms of we've seen in wrestling, we've seen it all. We've seen shows go black. We've seen power go out of the arena. We've seen some really bad technical issues, but I didn't experience that personally, and I didn't hear about that from the show itself. So technically, I thought that was done very well. The backstage segments was a little much with the librarians and them kind of shushing each other. It was okay, but backstage segments I don't think should be completely eliminated from wrestling, but I think they take away from a lot of the action. It's good for the viewer if you're watching it on television, but if you're at a wrestling event, you have to watch the screen, and that takes away from the flow of a show. So unless you have if you're cutting a minute promo about what you're going to do to your opponent, that stuff is okay, but don't fall in love with those backstage segments because it really does take the buzz out of the crowd, their live crowd that's viewing the show. So I thought that was not, and the pre-show's a lot of that, but I thought during the show itself, it wasn't too bad. I think another thing as well is, another overarching thing, a lot of the show, if you don't watch Being the Elite, which is the weekly show of the Young Bucks, Cody, SoCal Uncensored, they have a weekly internet show on their station. And it's a very good show, very entertaining. I like it a lot on YouTube. I watch it every Monday afternoon. The thing is, though, if you don't watch that show, and this is your first time watching All Elite Wrestling, and say, you know what, it's a professional wrestling, it's something different, I'm just going to watch it. I think 50% of the stuff may have gone over your head as far as who's this guy, who's that guy. The show itself, if you went to it, and all the fans, they popped and went off on a lot of wrestlers like MJF, like Hangman Page, on SoCal Uncensored. They were excited about it because they know who all those wrestlers are, and they know the storylines and what's been played out over the past 6 months. That went very well, but if you don't watch the show, outside of maybe Cody Rhodes and Jericho and Dustin Rhodes because they have WWE previous tenures. You may have heard of the Young Bucks because they've made a name for themselves in a very big way. But a lot of the other guys, you don't know who they are, honestly. And that's what this promotion will do. You'll get to know them over time. But I thought that there was leaning a little bit too much towards people who know of the show and know of that platform instead of the more traditional fan who maybe has not known as much. And that's a fine balance that they have to develop, that they have to find a way to cater to the person like me who has been watching these guys in New Japan and know about Kazarian and Christopher Daniels from their time in TNA and know the Young Bucks. I've been following the Young Bucks since Generation Me when they were in TNA close to 10 years ago. Know all of the background and that stuff. It's like, okay, I know these guys. I know what they're trying to do. But that's not the case for a lot of people that are going to be watching it, not only their pay-per-views, but especially when they get on network television. So I thought this show they were trying to balance it out and kind of a nod to their hardcore fans, but then introducing to a new audience. I think for the future, they're going to have to lean more towards the new audience with the first few months of their show on TNT in the fall. But I thought they did an okay job with that balance. But I know all the stuff. I'm trying to look at it from someone who did not know this, and that's why I'm reading reviews from other commentators and other just fans in general of wrestling. They're like, I liked what I saw, but I didn't know who those guys were. I'm not familiar with their storyline and things like that. So that was my thoughts. The actual matches themselves, we'll start with the main one. Chris Jericho versus Kenny Omega in the main event. The winner will get a title shot for the AEW title, and we'll get to the actual unveiling of the title itself. I thought that was done very well. Jericho, wrestling legend, been in the game for, he's got to be close to 30 years now, because I think he started in the early 90s. He's still doing what he does. Kenny Omega, someone argue, is the best pure wrestler in the world right now. He's on a short list. I can agree with that. thought their match was okay. I thought the New Japan match that they had last year was a little bit better, but I thought it was a respectable match. You could tell that Jericho, I mean, he's approaching 50, and though his approach has changed over time, it's more of a striking martial artist. And that's the thing about, if you know about Jericho in his past, when he was, the cruiserweight, a lot more high flying, a lot more flips, and of course the lion salt, which he still pulls out, and is one of the best to ever do it, the little back flip off the rope to land on the opponent. He's not as agile as he used to be, and he's really changed the tone. It's been more of, I said, like a boxing, mixed martial art, takedowns. He still has he still has his holds and things like that. So you're seeing that. And Omega is more of a high flyer, a lot of high moves, but they wrestled more of a traditional ground and pound, grinded out match. And Jericho was able to take advantage of it and use the back fist. I guess that's his new ending, or his new finisher. That's what I'm trying to say. His finisher. And he hit Omega once with it and knocked him down and got the pin. I like that they protected the finisher, because that's the one criticism I've had of guys like the Young Bucks and Omega, and this kind of their style of wrestling. A lot of high spots, but they also don't respect finishers. Guys put on their signature move, whether it's a lariat, a clothesline, a choke slam, a tombstone, whatever it is. And guys will use it on them, and then they kick out of it. That's one of my pet peeves of professional wrestling in general, guys not respecting finishers. So the fact that Jericho got his back fist shot in and was able to get the pin, and that ended it, that was very good. I liked that. And, of course, the end of the match also saw the debut of Johnny Moxley, a.k.a. Dean Ambrose, from WWE. He came into the ring, took out everybody there, which I liked, including the referee. I always like when referees take bumps. That's one of my favorite things. I know that could be a pet peeve. I mentioned similar to the not respecting the end finishes or the finishers. I know a pet peeve for others is when the referee takes a bump, but I enjoy seeing that. So Moxley went in there and took out the referee, took out Jericho, took out Omega, and then also in the back of the ramp, or at the top of the ramp, he threw Omega off of the set of dice, the little prop dice, and onto the floor. It was a big move, a takeout move. So I think now what you're seeing is Moxley is definitely going to be in the title picture, even though Jericho is going to face, looks like, Hangman Page for the first AEW champion. But we also see Kenny Omega. He's not going to go anywhere. I think Omega and Moxley, they'll probably be feuding once they get up and running in the summer. We'll probably see some teases of the next show. So I think that's what we're going to see. That's kind of like the four that are going to be on the top. Hangman Page, he won the Battle Royal, so he's going to get a title shot against Jericho. Gets first crack. I think we'll see Jericho go over, because he's a legacy. He's the biggest guy in the promotion, but I think Page is a young guy that's going to be in the title picture. But I think if they give it to Page, that's a little much, I think. I think when he's the first champion, you want an established guy. So, but Jericho, I think he looked good. I saw a lot of criticism about his physicality, both the way he worked and then his look. And the man, I said, he's at that age. If you expect him to have the six-pack abs and 20-inch biceps, that's not going to be the look he's going to have. That's just where he's not in his career. But I still think he's an effective worker. He knows how to control a match, and I think it was a very solid match. Was it an all-timer between Jericho and Omega? No, but I think it's something that got what needed to be done. The Young Bucks defeated the Lucha Brothers. I said the Young Bucks, a lot of flips, and I'm not really... I like the personalities, and I like seeing the high spots, and sometimes we like spot monkeys is a term people use. I don't mind so much if I know that's what I'm getting into. So whenever I know when the Young Bucks are involved in a match, it's going to be a lot of flips, a lot of twists and turns, not a lot of psychology in that regard. And that's what we got against the Lucha Brothers, who are tremendous wrestlers themselves. The thing about this, not criticism, but a critique people had, they knew about the Young Bucks. They had no idea who the Lucha Brothers are. I follow Mexican wrestling. Lucha Brothers are tremendous performers, but I think if you were more of a traditional wrestling fan, you didn't know who they were, and then that style of wrestling didn't necessarily cater to you. But wrestling should be a buffet as well. And we'll get to more of the old school type of match with Cody and Dustin coming up. But you can have that stomp them out, grind it out style, a lot of holds, a lot of submissions, a lot of headlocks. You can have that style of match. And then you could also have the more luchador type style match. And it was funny because the Lucha Brothers, Lucha's literally in their name, but the Young Bucks, they're pulling off moves that are more lucha than the Lucha Brothers. But that's what the Bucks do. They've kind of taken that style of wrestling and put it on their level. And I thought the match was okay, and the Bucks went over, not surprising, because it is their promotion. But no, the Bucks need to establish themselves as a major player. They're the AAA champions, which is not AAA, your auto service provider, the AAA and Mexican promotion. So they have those belts to give them some legitimacy, and we'll see what happens with them going on. Cody and Dustin, the Battle of the Rhodes Brothers. Really enjoyed this match. Favorite match of the show. Storyline is relatively simple. You have Dusty Rhodes, the legendary wrestler, his two sons fighting. But the backstory, and they're very public about it, Dustin is the older brother in one of Dusty's first relationships. Kind of a distant father-son relationship. Obviously, they got closer towards the end of Dusty's life, but Dustin's the older guy, kind of different circumstance than Cody Rhodes. Cody, father was very involved in his life, so there's a jealousy there between the brothers, and the younger brother getting more love than the older one, things like that. Cody, the younger guy, egotistical, very cocky. Dustin, even though he was Gold Dust for all those years in WWE, more of the quiet, reserved, working man type guy. So the storyline wrote itself, and I thought that the pacing was very good. Dustin bladed, took a lot of, got bloodied up, and that added to the match. Too much blood. I don't mind some blood in a match, but it was to the point where the Crimson Mask was, Dustin came in with a Crimson Mask, he had like red face paint, but the blood overwhelmed that. I thought it was a little much as far as the blood goes, but as for storyline purposes, I thought it worked well with the match. He said it was a slowly paced match. There's a lot of good holds, a lot of physicality, and the psychology of it. You could tell that Cody was the superior athlete. He's a stronger guy, but Dustin would just not go away and have that toughness about him. And Cody ended up winning the match and going over. And very emotional moment at the end where, because Dustin said this would pretty much be his last match against Cody, brother versus brother. But Cody said that's not going to happen. He wants his brother to be his partner against the Young Bucks at the next AEW event. Kind of similar, if you're a wrestling historian, to when Dusty Rhodes back in NWA or WCW, I think it was NWA by that time, when Dustin was a young wrestler and Dusty was in a feud and needed a partner to fight with him, and he said he wanted to have his son, and the wording was kind of similar as far as needing a son, needing a brother. So I thought that was a nice nod, a nice touch to the speeches. But overall, I thought that was my favorite match overall, because you had some high spots, but it was more of a traditional match that people could really get themselves into. The women's division has also been a very prominent aspect of AEW that they really tried to push, and Dr. Britt Baker, won the 4-way women's match against several wrestlers. Awesome Kong of Japan and of TNA fame, she made her debut with the promotion. Britt Baker has been in wrestling for many years. Good face for the promotion. They need some more women in there. I think that division will develop over time, because the women's, we've seen with WWE with Becky Lynch and Charlotte and Ronda Rousey, they really made a push. It was the main event of this past WrestleMania. So women's wrestling has taken a bigger but more of a bigger role in professional wrestling. And you could argue TNA with the knockouts. I remember when I was there, they really promoted women's wrestling quite a bit as well. But right now, in this climate, that's been a big thing that's pushed. And Baker is a good a good face to get it going. Oh, I was gonna have Brandy Rhodes. She's gonna be, I guess, kind of the commissioner of it. I thought she was gonna fight in the match because it was originally a 3-way, and all of a sudden you see Brandy come out. She's in a wrestling gear. I thought, okay, she's gonna be the fourth person, but no, she called out Awesome Kong, and I think Kong will be she's a legitimate fighter. She's a recognizable face from, I guess, Kia. Her name is Kia. Kia, she's an actress as well. She's been in Glow, the Netflix show. So she adds a recognizable face and name to the promotion. So I thought the match was okay overall, and I expect some more things from the women's division. SoCal Uncensored defeated the Strong Hearts. SoCal Uncensored, which Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, and Scorpio Sky have gone from, and Scorpio I think is the breakout star of that grouping. Kazarian and Daniels, talking about guys approaching 50. Daniels has to be of that age. He's been around for a very long time. Those are two strong hands. When I say hands, I mean veterans as far as Kaz and Daniels. They've been wrestling for 20 plus years. They keep reinventing themselves, and now they have Scorpio Sky with the SoCal Uncensored, where they cut promos insulting the city that they're in, but now they become so popular, now they're faces. And this is one of those things where if you do not watch Being the Elite, the YouTube show, you don't know all of that stuff. So all of a sudden you see some 3 guys coming out, and you're like, okay, those guys look familiar. I recognize Daniels maybe. Kazarian, I think I recognize. And then Sky, I don't know who the third person is. That's where they're going to have to educate their audience a little bit more. Now the fans in the arena got excited to see SoCal Uncensored, but this is where the announcers have to do a better job of really putting them over and what they've been doing. And I thought the match against Strong Hearts was so solid, the 3 Asian wrestlers. And I guess this is the good part about AEW so far from what I'm seeing, is that they have good cross promotions. You see them doing work with AAA, with the Young Bucks, and they're the tag team champions. The Asian organizations that they're going to work with, I guess this one is out of China, so that's a good situation. I'm trying to think who else they're going to work with. I think the only ones they're not going to work with, Johnny Moxley's doing some New Japan activities. It would be good if they could work with New Japan and with Ring of Honor, especially when you see Cody and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega having extensive histories with those promotions. But I don't think that's going to happen at this time, because now AEW is a competitor to what they're trying to do. But I think if you can have working with Mexican promotions, Asian promotions like that, I think that's a good sign for AEW, because you just increase your roster. And now myself, I'm going to check out AAA now. I'm going to see where the Strong Hearts were from. And those guys are very good wrestlers as well. But SoCal Uncensored got the win over. I thought Scorpio had some good highlights in that match and got the win. So far, I think the actual pay-per-view part of the show was well done. The pre-show, I thought, had some hits and some misses. The Battle Royal, think about Battle Royals, and that's the one that Hangman Page won, and you can get the title shot. You have it's the point where you're not going to have your main stars in the battle, in this, at least this type of Battle Royal. It's not the Royal Rumble. Royal Rumble is different when WWE does it in January, because the winner of that gets a shot at the championship, the heavyweight championship, whether it's WWE championship or they get a shot at the title, which I guess this Battle Royal does as well. But you're not going to have Jericho and Omega and the Bucks and Cody and those guys in this Battle Royal when they're going to fight later on in the show, and you kind of know the direction that they're going to go with that. So you kind of get the alternative wrestlers or the secondary wrestlers, and it's some guys that are you going to know Michael Nagasawa? Are you going to know about a lot of these wrestlers who are known in the independent scene but not on the mainstream level? You're probably not. So you're looking in the ring and you see a lot of these guys. Are you going to know who Jungle Boy is? You're probably not. And that's where the Battle Royal kind of lacks in that. And then you have some of the silliness going on with, no respect to Tommy Dreamer and Billy Gunn. Those guys have very long careers, but if you see them in a match like what's going on here? And you had Janetta with staple guns, and you had guys who it was a cluster of a battle royal. And this is where you have a wrestling promotion that's catering kind of to everybody. As I mentioned, if you want to see the high flyers and like the Bucks and the Lucha Brothers, you have that. If you like to see that grinded out style, you have Cody and Dustin. Jericho and Omega, kind of a young versus old kind of vibe going. So you have women wrestlers, they have their own distinctions. A battle royal, or at least this one, was kind of like, we're just going to get every random type of wrestler. We get the big guys, little guys, guys with just different styles, and put them in there. Battle royals are okay overall. As to the right man won, Hangman Page. I think that's the guy that does a really good job with that. But also the breakout guy of the entire night was MJF. Another guy who I think is a bona fide heel that can, maybe the best heel in professional wrestling today, but similar to what I've been saying throughout my entire review. If you don't watch Being the Elite, you're like, who is this little guy with the designer scarf and $20 haircut talking stuff? Who is this guy? That's where you need more introduction. I enjoy this stuff. He's great. Him with Bret Hart, who presented the championship title and unveiled it, tremendous work. You have MJF when the Battle Royal started, kicking the wrestler with the without the legs and calling him Lieutenant Dan. I shouldn't have laughed at that, but I must admit I laughed when I heard him call him Lieutenant Dan. That's such a bad heel thing to do, making fun of a man without legs wrestling. But that's what he's there to do, and there's no apologies about it. He's not trying to get over as far as being a cool heel. He's just being a jerk. You really want to kick him and smack him, and that's a good thing. So I thought he's been a breakout star in the entire promotion so far that they've been going. So I think right now it was a good event. There's some kinks, but they're gonna work through them. I like the pacing of what they're going to do. You have the event in June, which is later on this month. I think it's 2 weekends from now, where they're going to do a Fight Fire. I need to get the naming of that correct, but they're going to have something going on there. July, they have Fight for the Fallen, which is another event. And finally, August, All Out, which is kind of their WrestleMania equivalent. And once you get to August, that's when you're running into the fall, and that's when they're going to start doing their show. $50 is a little steep to be watching a wrestling show at this time, when personally I found a way to get around that. I'm not going to lie. So it wasn't really much out of my pocketbook, but out of my pocket, or a pocketbook if you carry a pocketbook, that's your own business. But I thought $50 was a little steep of a price for the promotion to have to pay for your show. I don't know how much the June and July shows are going to be, but if it's $50, that's going to be much. When we're programmed now to have WWE $10 a month with their network, which includes an archive. New Japan, similar deal, $10, and there's an archive with that as well. You get more bang for your buck, and for me to pay $50 just to see that show and not get any other benefits from it is a little much. But the buys apparently were very good. I think they got close to 200,000, which is very good for their second ever show. So the numbers are there, and the money was right. So it was too much for me, but for others it worked out. And their TV deal, it won't end on this. I like that they signed with TNT. Several reasons for this. One, TNT had Monday Night Nitro and had a WCW relationship for many years. So while people are used to seeing wrestling on USA Network, going back to the 80s, that's what they're used to seeing with WWE. They remember TNT with WCW, so that's a good thing. It's a basic cable program network. They didn't go to, and I have affection for TNA and what they're trying to do, Impact Wrestling. I call it TNA, but Impact Wrestling. But when you're on Audience or some of these other networks, that's not good. That's not as on as many networks or TV is not on many televisions as ESPN, as your E channels, your MTV, which are standard on your basic cable package. TNT is on your package, and that's very important. So I like that. What that also means is there's some good synergy with AEW being based in Jacksonville with the Khan family. TNT is based in Atlanta, Georgia, where we're based at. And you look at, so it's a southern connection, so that helps. But what's also good about TNT is that it's part of the Turner family of networks. What does that mean? What that means is that while you're on TNT, you can also be on TBS, the Cartoon Network, True TV. All of those networks can have AEW crossover because they're all part of Turner. So that means if you want to do another show in the future, you can do TBS. Cartoon Network, animation, and wrestling have been going together for decades and decades. If you want to do some crossover with that, animation-wise, and I know Omega's very much into the anime, which is very popular in wrestling. There's a lot of crossover there. You have the Cartoon Network. True TV, they have the reality shows like Impractical Jokers, which I'm a very big fan. I watch it every day, literally. So, but that show's very popular. A lot of crossover there. So if you want to have some of the AEW guys involved in some of the Impractical Joker stuff or some of the other original programming, you have that available. When it gets to NCAA tournament time, they have a big package with the men's basketball in March. It could be very easily have a Cody Rhodes on the panel for some things. You can see a lot, and I've already seen commercials with AEW and TNT, them trying to show the images and what's going on there. So I thought that was a very good deal. I thought it was a better deal than a Fox, because all you would have had is Fox and FS1, and then you would have had some tension because the main Fox is going to have WWE SmackDown. So who's going to get the better promotion, WWE or AEW? WWE is in that situation. So I thought that would have not been a good option. ESPN is already booked to the gills. They have professional football. They have NBA. They have UFC. You're not going to be able to find your footing there at all. So I thought that AEW going to TNT or to Turner is a very good move for what they're trying to do. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll go get into NXT TakeOver that took place on June 1st here on the Sports Inquirer show. All right, now we're back for the NXT TakeOver portion of the show, or WWE part of the verbal submission. I'm not going to lie, I have been slacking on my WWE. I didn't even know there was a TakeOver taking place until the night of, and I saw some things on Twitter, and I thought it was like, oh, they're replaying a TakeOver from WrestleMania or maybe one of the past ones. It's like, no, it's a full-fledged new show. And matter of fact, not only it wasn't a new show, it was NXT TakeOver 25. So I was like, there's a 25th version of their show of NXT. I thought it was a solid show overall. I'll just go over the main results with it. Adam Cole was finally able to win the NXT Championship over Johnny Gargano. I don't know if Gargano is going to now be promoted into the main promotion, SmackDown or Raw, but I think you have to have that rubber match between Cole and Gargano. I assume they'll save it until SummerSlam. That would make the most sense. But Cole being the champion is interesting because he's supposed to be the heel and Gargano's supposed to be the face. But the fan reaction has been 50-50 with them. Cole has really turned into the thing about Cole, one, he's a tremendous worker. And it's Gargano. But he has a lot working for him. One, he has a good look. He's guys, the women I've seen or talked to find him very appealing visually. So that's a good thing. Men too, in their own way. So I think he's a visually appealing guy. He's got the hair and the body. I think that's something that's very undervalued when you look at wrestling, especially from a male perspective, because we look at it as guys. And it's like, oh, we don't really notice, like, oh, he's this, that, as far as physically. But women can constitute a good amount of the audience. And if you're a good-looking guy, like Cole is, that helps. He has very recognizable he has a really good theme song, I guess, with his group. So that's good. And they get to do the boom and all of that stuff. He also has the Adam Cole baby. That's something that fans can do. That's one thing I want to remember who said it, and I'll try to remember our next show. But a wrestler. This was one of his podcasts, and his thing was that for you to go over to a mainstream level, maybe from Rock to Stone Cold to Hogan, Ric Flair, to reach that level, John Cena, you have to have two things. One, you have to be relatable as far as be able to describe you in 3 words or less. I usually say maybe a sentence. 3 words is a little extreme. Maybe 5 or 6 words or less. And 2, you have to have very imitatable things to do. With Stone Cold, you could do the middle finger and all that stuff. With The Rock, you could do the eyebrow, his little, when he would throw his fist in the air. Stone Cold did the fist thing too. Hogan had a bunch of his flexes and pythons, Flair. You could do a lot of his dances and things like that. Cena, he has the "You Can't See Me" with the hand movement and the hustle little cheat, like all the things. If you become a big time star, I'm not saying that Cole is at that level yet, but they have imitatable things. So when Cole, when he enters the ring and then points at himself when the boom part of his theme song comes, that's important. Also, when he bends down and reaches both of his hands up with the pointing sign with the Adam Cole baby, when the fans could do it with him, that's huge. That's something that you can do to him. You could do that with your friends. So he has that appeal for him as well. So I think he's doing those things, trying to be a jerk and be an arrogant heel, but it's so appealing to the fans who are watching it from home or at the arena. He's turned into a face, and that's where he now is the champion. And we'll have to see how he handles this now, because he's been ruthless with the Undisputed Era and his grouping with Roderick and Fish and all of those guys, and O'Reilly. That group has been deceptive and been mean. They've been playing heel. I don't want them to turn into a face faction, but they're just so darn good, and the fans love them so much. We'll see what happens there. But I think Gargano should get that rematch, and that could be a nice feud to go on for the next few months. And whether they get promoted to the next level, we'll see. But I thought that was a solid match and went from there. Shayna Baszler, she was able to defeat a Shirai to retain the Women's Championship. Baszler should be on the main roster. Not only should she be on the main roster, I guess with Ronda now taking a time off to heal up and maybe start a family, Baszler should be right in the main picture for the championship. She has a direct background with MMA just as much as Ronda. I mean, Ronda was a champion, yes, but Baszler's right there as far as the legitimate fighting background. So she could be a major player in that regard. She's ran through the entire women's division of NXT. And this is what you feared when NXT had the women's division at its peak 2-3 years ago, when you had Becky and Charlotte and Bayley and Sasha Banks, all of those players, Asuka, all of them down there. Tremendous women's division, maybe the best. You could argue maybe the best women's division in all of wrestling at that time, around 2015 and 16. But all of those women have moved up to the main roster and are doing their thing there. But it's left a vacuum, especially when Asuka left. You left a vacuum of women that are not there. And what they did is now the Lacey Evans, some of those the Mandy Roses, some of those wrestlers, that the Iconics that should have been in NXT right now, building up that division again, they've been pushed to the main roster with this Women's Revolution. So you have even the secondary women who really could use some time, whether it's for promos or for their in-ring skills, could be in NXT. They are on the main roster kind of trying to find themselves. So Baszler has been a big beneficiary of that and just dominating the division. But I think with Shirai, that was a very good match. I would assume that Baszler needs to be on the main roster very soon. Shirai will be a good person to go to carry the mantle of the NXT Women's Championship until they can rebuild it once again. But I thought that match was okay. The Velveteen Dream Tyler Breeze match and Dream won to retain the North American title. I'm very intrigued by this Tyler Breeze. He's been gone for a while. He's officially part of NXT. He was one of the original guys that was in NXT when they renamed it about 6-7 years ago now, and found his name, built his name there, went to the main roster, had hits and misses, really got lost in the shuffle, and now he's back down at NXT trying to rebuild himself. And you have Velveteen Dream, who's kind of running the same type of flamboyant promotional style that Tyler Breeze was doing, from the flamboyant outfits to the movements to things like that, being very egotistical. All that stuff that Velveteen Dream is doing, Tyler Breeze was doing years ago. So I think those two should continue their feud and have that going. Breeze is a very good worker, and I think Dream, who I think has the potential to be a star if it works out right for him, is still a guy who's developing. So working with the Tyler Breeze will be a very good deal for him. So the show itself I thought was okay. The standards of the NXT shows have gotten so high, I could argue that their last NXT show during WrestleMania weekend was better than WrestleMania itself. Now, WrestleMania has a lot going against it. You have a deader crowd because it's 100,000 people in a football stadium. It's tough to keep the energy going. It's a close to 6-7 hour deal. You're dealing with weather. People are hot. People aren't into it. You have a lot of goofy matches that take place during the WrestleMania card itself, while the NXT takeovers that take place during WrestleMania weekend are usually in an arena, enclosed. People are very much into it. They're very excited about it. They know all the wrestlers going into it, so it leads to a better atmosphere, and the guys, I think, and men and women do a better job as far as in-ring work. WrestleMania is more about the pomp and circumstance. You have celebrities involved in there. You have extra long promos and things like that, when NXT is about the fight itself. So I think that I say all of that to say that the promotion of being 25 of them, when it's a non Big Four pay-per-view related one, I think it's tough to have a takeover be known as well or be considered just as good as one that's the day before WrestleMania or SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble. When it's a standalone by itself, it's like, it's okay. But on any other weekend, you'd be like, all right, that was a solid show. But the standard, especially after the last one, when someone say was the best NXT takeover ever, that was tough to deal with or tough to compare to. But I thought it was a solid show overall. And then lastly, we'll go straight to our main point with the boxing. Let me make sure my time is right. All right, we're good. We got a few minutes. The thing about the boxing, we have a new heavyweight champion. Andy Ruiz Jr. was able to defeat Anthony Joshua on June 1st, and he is now holds 4 of the belts. I don't think and this thing about boxing, first of all, so confusing. You can't say he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world because there's still another belt that Deontay Wilder holds. So you still have 4. Why there are 5 belts is ridiculous. So Ruiz, while he's the heavyweight champion of the world, he doesn't have all the belts yet. But still, Joshua held 4 of them, was considered the best fighter in the world. Ruiz took the fight on a month notice. I think you saw that by his physical build. Now, he's not a guy that, and you see the comparison, Joshua looks like he's straight out of we're talking about animation, just the body, his build, 6'5", 200 and whatever pounds, chiseled. He looks like a fighter. If you built a fighter from in a lab or in a drawing, he looked like Anthony Joshua. You could tell an elite athlete, all those levels. And then you have Andy Ruiz, who's he's not a small man, and people are saying, oh, he's short. He's like 6'2". He has some height to him, but you look at his body, and I said part of that's the training. He only had a month to train for this fight. I think if he had a good 3-month camp, he would look tighter and would not look as pudgy, to put that nicely. But I think that's what you would see more improvement. But he's not going to ever have the abs and the big biceps and the large back that you would see from a Joshua. That's just not his build. But he's been fighting his whole life, literally, from 5 years old to now. While Joshua picked up the fighting game, I think he was 20. Just like Deontay Wilder. He started fighting when he was 18 or 19. So these guys were grown men when they started. Ruiz has been fighting us since a kid, and you saw that. Ruiz got knocked down, got back up, and you saw that he, while physically doesn't look like the part, his technique is very aggressive. Joshua's been knocked down before. When he won the championships, Klitschko knocked him down, and Joshua got back up and won and was able to get the win. But we know Joshua has a soft chin, and we saw him get knocked down multiple times. And Ruiz just has a confusing style. He's a brawler, and you can tell it's not like he hits hard, but he just knows how to hit you and where to hit you at the right time. And that was the biggest difference in the fight. While Joshua was able to get his knockdown early because he's physically just Joshua, and Joshua's a good fighter. He deserves a rematch, and I think we'll see that eventually. But when it came to technique and toughness, that's where Ruiz was able to get the win. And the question now is this good or bad for boxing? I think it's a good thing. Because I think with Ruiz, he's going to be more willing to fight Wilder, fight Tyson Fury. Joshua, for all of his success, I don't want to say a man's ever ducking another man because it's boxing, and anytime you step into a ring, you're tough. You're not soft. But the fact that Joshua and Wilder were unable to come up with a deal, with a contract, is bad. The fact that Joshua and Fury haven't been able to get something on paper is bad. So maybe with Ruiz, we get a unification, number one. Maybe Wilder and Ruiz can fight, and we can finally have a true undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. That'd be step one. But when that fight happens, maybe Joshua and Wilder will be more willing to fight each other. Tyson Fury, he's out there. I know Fury and Wilder said they're going to fight again. I guess that's going to be the next matchup. But that was before this Ruiz upset. I think that opens up a lot of things now for Ruiz and Wilder to fight. But maybe Joshua and so you have four guys, I think, that are all lurking there. I did feel bad for Big Baby Miller, who's a Brooklynite like myself. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, like Big Baby, so I always go for Brooklyn guys. But unfortunately, he failed his drug test and was unable to. That's why Ruiz was in that spot. It was supposed to be Miller and Joshua in that fight, but so Miller failed the test, and Ruiz got in and took advantage of it. I don't know if Miller is going to be in a title match anytime soon, but now if he could beat a Fury, or if Wilder loses, because I know those two have been beefing verbally for a long time. So Miller, I think, is a heavyweight contender. He's got the suspension, I think, will be over by the end of the year. So maybe he throws his hat in the ring. I like this. I like that there's some diversity in there. And you got to look at it from a international perspective. We look at Ruiz, he's a Mexican-American. That's big as far as first Mexican to ever hold the heavyweight championship. That's big. That's a big situation. So as far as promotion of the sport, that's very good. Yeah, Fury and Joshua, who are from Great Britain, that's very good. And Wilder's from Alabama, so he's American. So I think that whole dynamic, you have kind of the European side, the Mexican side, and the United States. All of those guys kind of going together and fighting for the championship. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And Ruiz seems like he has a good personality. I think the look is going to be appealing to a lot of guys because not everyone can look like Anthony Joshua or even Wilder. So I think Ruiz for bigger guys, it's like, okay, I have someone that kind of looks like me and has a dad bod and can fight. So I think that's going to help for promotion of the sport overall. But the point is that we're talking about it right now, and I think an upset is good because those guys. I mean, Joshua's going to be. He's not going anywhere. Wilder's not going anywhere. Fury, with his head's right, and it seems like he's in a good place right now, mentally and physically. He's going to be around. And then Miller, I know suspension, that's very bad, but he is a major contender as well once he gets through the valley that he's dealing with right now. Or, yeah, the valley, the bad times. So he'll be around. So I think this is good. So over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see some really good heavyweight fighting, and that's a win for everybody. All right, so that's the end of our show. Thanks for listening. I'm very excited I was finally able to do a verbal submission. We'll try to do them periodically as much as we can. But as always, head to the sportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can go to Sports Inquirer and search for that on Twitter and Instagram, all one word. Facebook, The Sports Inquirer. And finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes for now under The Sports Inquirer. Until next time, good fight and good night.